Hey guys, Jexie here. So I regularly get asked how I explained addiction to my kids. My children are currently 12 and 9, but considering I started this journey over 6 years ago, they were much smaller when I first got clean. Obviously, the conversation that I've had with them has evolved over time, but I wanted to give you guys an idea of how I explained addiction to my children. I thought it was a good idea to give an analogy that explained addiction to something that they already understood. So the way I explained it to them when they were little, and again, even still today, is I told them, I said, you know how when you get sick, let's say you have a bad cough and you have to take cough medicine and mommy puts it on a teaspoon and I give you a teaspoon, you take the cough medicine and then you feel better. I told them, I said, mommy's brain is confused. When I take that teaspoon of cough medicine, my brain will tell me that it's not enough and that I need to take more. And unfortunately, it doesn't tell me when to stop. And I'll be totally convinced that I need more and more, even though it's making me sick. And so because I have addiction, I make sure that I don't touch alcohol. I'm very careful about what medications I have to take, all of that, because just the wrong substance can make mommy's brain go right back into that same cycle. And so everything that we've talked about has kind of evolved from there. There are benefits and downfalls of being open and honest with your children about addiction. For me, the benefits outweigh the downfalls. I thought that although my children didn't really see me in active addiction is something that affects them in so many ways. They have friends whose parents have overdosed and died. They've been able to understand that in a way, accept it in a way that they probably wouldn't have been able to if they didn't understand the disease of addiction. I am in no way advocating that the only way to manage having children as an addict is to tell them everything. Parents know best. I'm a big believer that moms know, or dads, know their children best. And so I'm only telling you what I do with my children. I also don't vilify things like alcohol. Although I don't drink, and I part of my recovery program keeps me from drinking at all. I don't use any mind or mood altering substance in any way. But I also don't vilify it, because the reality of it is that kids are going to experiment. As much as I'd like to say that my kids will never touch alcohol or drugs ever in their lives as they get older, that's probably just not real. And if I vilify things and I make them afraid of things, I close the doors for them to honestly communicate with me as they get older. I want to know if my children have tried alcohol. I want to know if they end up experimenting with drugs. I want to be able to have open and honest communications with them about the dangers without making them fearful of everything. You know, if I tell them that alcohol is awful and terrible and dangerous, and then they see their friends' parents have a beer during the Super Bowl, that becomes a very mixed message. I can't tell them that it's all those awful things, but then say that their friend's parents okay to drink beer at the Super Bowl, right? So I try to be as open and honest without making anything be these, grandiose ideas of danger. They understand the dangers of drugs, but I try to keep it real. I'm a big believer that one of the mistakes that have been made in the way we've talked about drug education is that we group all drugs the same. And the fact is they're not. Look, marijuana is never going to be as dangerous as heroin. It doesn't mean that a person should use marijuana, but we can't classify it the same way. We can't talk to kids, in my opinion, about drug use and make them feel that taking a hit of a joint is the same thing as shoving a needle in their arm. They're not. Taking a hit of a joint isn't going to cause you to overdose and die. But using heroin for the first time could kill you. I need my children to understand the difference. And the only way for them to understand the difference is for me to explain that there is a difference. Most education systems don't do that. We kind of classify everything together, which in my opinion is a very confusing message. I also think that parents know their kids better than anybody else. And I know a lot of parents who keep recovery completely separate from their children. My children are involved in my recovery program. When I celebrate each New Year clean, They come with me. They participate. They get me a cake. I love that they want to celebrate my accomplishments with me, because the fact is, without recovery, I wouldn't be able to be the kind of mom that I am today. So I want them to be able to ask questions. Asking questions is a big thing. Let them ask questions and answer them to the best of your ability. Look, there's no right answer for things, and I'll tell you, there's no experience like having your then 4-year-old son ask you in this, cereal aisle of the supermarket, Mom, am I going to grow up and get the addiction? Am I going to have a problem with the addiction? That's how I used to call it. Yeah, I was a little bit taken aback. It was kind of out of nowhere. But I stopped everything I was doing. I got down to his level. And I explained to him, like, look, my answer is I don't know. I don't know. I can't predict the future. But I told him, I was like, if you just make good choices, then you have nothing to worry about. Because even if you're born with whatever the gene is or whatever it is that makes you more susceptible to being an addict, you can't become addicted to drugs if you don't use drugs. It's just that simple. So I try to make him aware that whether we have that gene that makes us susceptible to addiction or not, it doesn't really matter. If we're smart from the beginning and we make good choices, that doesn't really have to be anything we have to worry about. It's also important to recognize the signs of addiction early, and that's why I talk to my kids about it. I want them to be able to recognize in themselves if they may have a problem before it's a problem. Luckily, I've been seeing a lot of young people who are starting recovery, which I think is fantastic. Having people know that you don't have to use drugs to have fun. You don't have to drink beer to fit in. You don't have to, you don't have to do any of those things to be part of a group. My job as a mother is to make sure that my children understand the weight of their choices. And for me, the only way they can understand that is by having a really clear understanding as to what addiction is, how it works, and what it means. I keep it age appropriate. My children they're too young to know everything about everything. I'm never going to tell them a lot of specifics of my life. I'm their mother. That's not appropriate, right? But I do let them know that, like, addiction's hard. And they ask a lot of times, well, Mommy, are you ever going to be able to drink at a wedding? Are you ever? And I tell them, no. I'm making the choice, knowing that my brain reacts a certain way to medicines or alcohol. I'm making the choice to stay away from all of those substances so that I don't have to worry about having a potential problem. I don't judge people who use drugs or alcohol, but I will tell you this. Having my children, my daughter specifically, last year, come home from school after having a lesson on drugs and alcohol and tell me how her teacher seemed a little confused on things, and my daughter is repeating back information to me that's more accurate than what her teacher had described. The textbook wasn't wrong. The teacher had actually interpreted what was in the textbook incorrectly. She was teaching children that anybody who uses drugs or alcohol was a bad person. And I was very upset about that because, look, being an addict causes you to do bad things. That's fact. A lot of people will do whatever it takes to get the next one. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. I believe that those who are dealing with active addiction are sick. They're not bad people, but their disease makes them do bad things. That's an important distinction to make. If we treat people as being bad because they're sick, then how do we help them? How do we get out of this dilemma that our country and the world is facing right now? We have an epidemic that's killing people. So how do we fix it if we're not willing to talk about it? If we assume that anybody who uses drugs is bad or evil, that's so close-minded. I would guarantee you that most people that you come across know somebody who's dealing with active addiction. There's no way they're all bad people. It's way more likely that they're sick. So by working together and teaching our children from a young age the dangers, I think we can prevent a lot of problems in the future. I also am very careful because the fact is a lot of my kids know other kids whose parents have overdosed, whose parents are still using drugs. That open, honest information can come into play for a lot of reasons. So that's kind of how I've spoken to my kids and my views on it. I would really love to hear how you guys have spoken to your kids about addiction. Have your kids asked about it? Have they learned anything in school? Do they have a family member who's dealing with active addiction? Do you bring them to your recovery programs? Anything. I would love to hear other people's experiences about how they manage their children in recovery. Thanks. And remember, if you're interested in having me talk about any particular topic, just leave it in the comments and I will absolutely address it. I think, again, dialogue is how we really attack this problem. So have a great day, everyone.